everybody, it's great to be back here again. It's Friday, it's Erev Shabbat, and let's get down to our Torah lesson. I'm a little hoarse. We just got back from an exercise, our response team, and sometimes we yell out, everyone get down, all kinds of screaming and yelling, so my voice is a little hoarse. I hope my message will be clear. The Torah, we're all familiar with the Babylonian custom of finishing the Torah once a year, where the Torah is divided into weekly portions, Bereshit, Noach, Lech Lech, the entire famous division, entire custom of the Jewish people is to do that once a year now. But we know that in the, going way back, there was also the Israeli custom in Israel before Babylon to divide the Torah into something called orders, and they would finish the Torah not every year, but once in 3 years. And then, as we know, the ancient Misorah would have divided the Torah into different, parshiot, two kinds of parshiot, two kinds of portions. As we say, one is called the closed and one is an open portion. Whatever it is, there's no doubt that last week's portion and this week's portion are divided. Last week's portion we discussed at length the whole story of how, of course, there's a famine and the brothers of Joseph came down to get bread, to purchase bread from Egypt, and they went back, and the whole story of Parashat Vayigash, where we see we were left in suspense, tremendous suspense, where Benjamin was accused of stealing, the cup of Joseph, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And the Torah leaves us in this suspense. And every year, telling you, and do my whole entire life reading portions in the Torah, thank God, enjoying it every year, and every year I have the same suspense. I don't know how Hashem has done it, but a miracle. When you read the Torah every year, you feel, wow. You feel the suspense, you feel it coming to life, and you feel like you're really there, and you want to know, why is the Torah end right here? We want a happy ending already. We don't want to be left in suspense and get nervous. What's going to happen to the brothers, and is Benjamin going to go to prison, and what's going to be over here? Why does the Torah leave us in that suspense for? Why just continue? In the ancient custom of dividing the portions, they divided it up over here. They left us in suspense. And of course, one simple explanation, I think, something that really touches upon my heart personally, is in life, life is full of suspense and full of very, very challenging moments in our lives. And sometimes we have to stop ourselves, before we get to the ending. We're right now in a situation where we don't see how it's going to be a happy ending. We don't know how the ending is going to really end up. But of course, when we experience such challenges in our lives, we have to always stand with faith in Hashem and saying Hashem will get us through this, and God willing, we will come out okay. We have to pray and stand strong in our faith to Hashem, and realize there's always an escape route. In most instances, of course. There are, unfortunately, very, very sad endings. But the Torah is full of happy endings. Although our forefathers have been through so many things, and I think we mentioned this in the past, right before the Isaac was offered, the bounding of Isaac on the altar. Of course, it ended the last minute. He was saved, and Jacob, of course. Right now, this week's portion, after all the suspense of Jacob thinking that Joseph was eaten up by a wild animal, and he was gone, and all of a sudden he has the beautiful the beautiful experience of reuniting with his son, which is amazing, of course. And again, happy endings, because at the end, everything is going to always be happy. Hashem, the divine plan of the world, is to bring the world to redemption, to happy ending. And sometimes we're in suspense, and there's we got to stop and realize, yes, you will be in suspense. We're right now in a situation, the world's in suspense. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen a few minutes from now. But we always have to realize, have strong faith in Hashem, that of course there will be a happy ending eventually to the entire universe. And that's what the divine plan is all about. That's one important message, I think, about that separation. I think another important message of this week's portion is responsibility. It's amazing how Joseph just takes responsibility for his family. And not only that he's this huge second in command in Egypt, and taking real responsibility for providing a nice economical situation for the entire world in a crisis of famine. He's able to know how to deal with that situation and really save the world from a terrible, terrible destruction. This is the power of Yosef. But of course, on the other hand, Joseph doesn't forget his family, although We know what his family did to him, what his brothers did to him. I mean, anyone normal, we know experiences in our world that we are all in, that we hear about family feuds and people in families to this day. They have a hard time of issues, much less than what happened to Joseph. We don't really see many families of throwing the brother in the pit and trying to sell him down to Egypt and all kinds of things like that, or selling a brother out. Although there are crazy stories like that. I mean, it happened here in the Torah, but we are all kinds of stories of like fighting over financial issues with brothers and family feuds over this and not getting along. He doesn't talk to that brother, doesn't talk to that sister, and I think it's a very painful thing when you see that. It's a very painful when you see that their family feuds. It's really painful. I really thank Hashem that my three beautiful sisters, that thank God we all have always gotten along wonderfully, and just wonderful people, and getting along. It's just beautiful. We have a family that gets along and everyone loves each other. It's something so special, but to appreciate. And unfortunately, you see so much around you, so many things that shouldn't really be there. And where does it come from? This family, this lack of, we say in Hebrew, shalom bayit, this lack of peace within a house, which is so important to maintain a house of love and peace, and of course the broader sense of the house, our family and our friends, of course. And Joseph is I would say, we say in Hebrew, the aluf, the champion. Number one, of course, in the beginning he's playing very, very tough, but we know Joseph has obviously some kind of plan here, because you see right away when he reveals himself to his brothers that everything is all about faith and about realizing that you're really not to blame, that Hashem has set everything up here and whatever. He had a plan of being tough in the beginning. He really wanted to see responsibility. He wanted to see how now his other brother, Benjamin, from the same mother, he wanted to see how they would treat him, of course, since Yosef and him were really brothers from the same mother. And this was the really test. Yosef wanted to see if a change went over. Because when a person goes through something in this world and it happens to him, something unfortunate in this world, an experience, and the real test is to realize that he realized he made a mistake, is that he can really come back and make a real change and realize his mistake. In order to rectify, 99% of rectification is realizing, of course, what we did wrong, and being able to admit that we weren't beseder, we weren't okay. This was the amazing characteristic of David, of course. When David sinned with the terrible sin of Bathsheba, as we all know, and right away he didn't make excuses. He said, he sinned right away. He just went out and said, I wasn't okay. I wasn't good. I wasn't okay. I sinned. Right away to admit is very, very important, because when you admit something, you can rectify. That's exactly what really Joseph wanted to see in the brothers before he revealed himself, to test them and see if they would take responsibility. And of course, who came to the call of the hour was Judah. Again, as we know that Judah and Joseph, there's a lot of tension over there, because later on in history, we know that these are the two main parts of the tribes, or every one of the 12 tribes have an important part. But the two parts of leadership in Israel are Judah and Joseph. And this goes, of course, throughout history. Joseph, of course, representing the physical building of the world, as we see what Joseph's whole purpose was all about, building everything physically and providing, in times of terrible, terrible famine, and in all situations. That was really Joseph, which the world needs to be materialistically strong as well. And on top of that, on top of that wall, that important foundation, Yosef is called the Yesod, the foundation. We build the spiritual, and that's Judah. His whole function is spiritual. And of course, Judah eventually will later on become the kings of Judah. That's really the line of David, which is really the line of leadership. So that represents more of the spiritual actions with the spiritual powers and Torah and Torah leadership of really the highest spiritual level. That has to really be ahead. That has to be on top. That has to be leading the physical world forward. And that's why, again, there's the natural tension between Judah and Joseph, because there are two opposing forces, they may seem. But the whole idea is the prophets talk about grafting, of taking the two trees, the tree of Joseph, the tree of Judah, and combining those two powers together, and together we have one healthy nation when they're both working together. It's very interesting. Sometimes the spiritual side doesn't really see the importance of the physical, which is wrong. A lot of people make that mistakes. You see this in many, many religions, don't know how to deal with the proper balance of spiritual and physical. I'm not going to go through all the religions now in the world, but that's a major issue. There are those who don't believe, for example, getting married is completely, not a good thing, on the highest levels of spirituality, which is, of course, is in Judaism, we believe that there's a combination of these two worlds. You must combine both of them. Combine both worlds of spirituality together with physicality, materialism, and together uplift the entire world. And that's the beauty of Joseph meeting Judah. But the tension is there. There's a deep spiritual concept behind this tension. And the responsibility, as I mentioned before, which is the topic of this lesson, comes from everyone realizing his goal and his function. And Joseph knows very well his responsibility to his brothers, to the world. He's a tremendous individual responsibility, and everything is all built, of course, on his faith. On faith in Hashem, realizing that everything that happened to him, of course, because God wanted him to go through the stage. And he's to get down to Egypt and to support, end up being involved there, being able to support his family and build the house of Israel. And looking at everything, of course, in a perspective of proper, outlook, the way you look at things. And not falling into the personal anger that he may have for his family, his brothers that did something terrible to him. And this is what Joseph wanted to see, that Judah took his responsibility, of Benjamin, that he now was taking responsibility of his brothers and realizing that there is no more room for family feuds. We have to have family love in the home. When Joseph saw this, of course, right away he was ready to reunite with his brothers, and he took everyone out of the room there, and an amazing reunion of the family, the brothers, of course, and Joseph immediately talking about how everything happened, as we say, Gamzu L'Tovah, it all happened for the good, for the benefit, to provide for everybody. And then, it's amazing, our rabbis teach us that when Jacob sees the agalot, the wagons, he realizes, he finally is convinced that Joseph is still alive. And why the wagons? And our rabbis teach us that these wagons represent a portion of Torah they were learning together right before they left each other. We spoke about this in, I think, our previous lesson. And they were discussing, Jacob and Joseph were learning about Eglah Ufa. About Eglah Ufa is about a situation where a body is found equidistant between two cities, and they don't know what happened, where it's all involved in this terrible, terrible tragedy. And they measure from city to city to see the closest city, and then they take, again, the famous, what they do with the calf, etc. Whatever they have to do in the Torah is mentioned, breaking its neck. This whole thing of Eglah Ufa, as we say, represents responsibility. No one could lift up his hand and say, I'm not responsible. A terrible, terrible tragedy took place in the world. We must respond. We cannot sit aside and complete, just completely, as we say in Hebrew, adishut, meaning doesn't interest me at all. You can't be adishim. You must always look at what's happening in the world, look at what's happening, and take responsibility. And this is, of course, what the beauty of Joseph is all about, taking responsibility. And this is what he received from his father. This is what the Torah teaches us. We must be responsible people. Today, right now, I'm here again on Itamar, and we have every day something new happens in this community where we only pray for good things, of course, and it should continue to follow us here. Good things on the community, although we've been through so many hardships. And I just want to talk about one small issue, which is something which is going on now. Itamar, as we all know, after the Fogel massacre, terrible massacre, we started building a new neighborhood of a couple of small houses there, and etc. outside our city boundaries, but that neighbor is really providing security for our community, and a camera system was set up there. And then just about a month ago, the army came, the Israeli government said, we don't want to, we don't want this hilltop to be standing here. Now it's outside the city boundaries, and legally, of course, they're right. It's outside our city boundaries. You don't have a permit for building there. But of course, sometimes it's people they look at only the black and white letters of the law. Okay, is he building outside a city boundary? You don't look at what is it doing there? Why did we set up a couple of houses outside our city boundary? And the answer was very, very clearly is that this provides protection for the community. People are living there now, and we're responding to terrorism. We're not letting terrorists get away with the terrible murder they did. We're building a new neighborhood that, God willing, will be accepted by the Israeli government and will become permitted since it's on Israeli land. But anyway, what happened? They came and they knocked down those houses. Not only that, we had a security camera which they decided to uproot all the wires, the whole foundation that was connected to the wires of our security camera, rendering our security camera completely knocked it out of whack. And unfortunately, a month already, has not been returned to use, our security camera. And the Army now says, no problem, we will reconnect it, which means we'll pay for it. We did the damage, we'll pay for reconnecting your camera, if on condition that you get out of that hilltop. And we're saying, what do you like you're dealing with us, you're making here like conditions on taking responsibility over our security. And this is the kind of thing, it sounds funny, but within families, but unfortunately this is what's going on. And our response is that we are demanding from the army in Israel to show responsibility to the citizens of Israel, those who live here on Israel, live here in Itamar, and take responsibility of putting that camera back together. But anyway, since this is the situation, and we have to be realize what we're living in, what kind of situation we're living in, we decided to take personal responsibility as a community here, and we want to try to raise money now for our security camera, for the reconnecting it. And the cost of this project is about 45,000 shekels. So anyone who really sees a way of helping us to try to reconnect this, we will be very, very grateful. And I'll keep you informed of what's going on. Anyway, have an amazing Shabbat. It was great to be back again. And we'll see you all soon. Shabbat shalom. Bye-bye.